Hello, my name is Rueben.MPG, and I'm going to talk about President Obama. During the 2008 presidential elections, then Senator Obama ran on the promise of change. But has President Obama lived up to that promise? Have things really changed? Or is it more of the same? And this brings me to my claim that President Obama has failed to keep his most important campaign promises. Promises such as letting the Bush tax cuts expire, closing down Guantanamo Bay, and becoming the most transparent administration in U.S. history. Today I will be speaking about these failed promises and the damage that it's made to the American people, and I will conclude by stating what we can do to make sure that this doesn't happen again. So my first subclaim is that President Obama failed to let the Bush-era tax cuts expire. That means is that the tax cuts will add to the deficit, and I have Julie Mason here, of the Examiner, explaining that the unemployment benefits, which are going to be extended, and the 2-year tax cut would alone cost $270 billion in the next 2 years. What that means is that Obama made a compromise so that in order to get to extend these tax cuts, unemployment would be extended for a year. So keep in mind that these tax cuts will be extended for the next 2 years. These tax cuts will benefit the wealthy and those whose income is higher. As Julie Mason states, the package would cut 6.2% of Social Security tax. 2%, which means that someone making $40,000 a year will get $800 in tax break, as opposed to someone who's making or earning $70,000 would get, and they would get $1,400 tax relief. So the more you make, the better you'll be off. President Obama promised he would let the Bush tax cuts expire because they primarily benefit the wealthy. And in his campaign elections, this is something that he based his campaign on. My second subclaim is that President Obama failed to close down Guantanamo Bay. During the election of 2008, President Obama promised he would close down the unpopular facility within a year. Yet the Daily Telegraph, which is a London newspaper, reports that the White House lawyers are drafting an executive order that would allow an infinite detention of 50 inmates. And this 11th of January marked the 9-year anniversary of the facility. And an ex-detainee, Mozambique, was saying that individuals are caged indefinitely without the access of properly constituted legal rights. So you can see that there's a conflict of interest, and it's definitely not something that is American. My third subclaim states that the Obama administration has failed its government transparency. The American people have the right to know what their government is up to. President Obama promised to have the most transparent administration in U.S. history. And this is back in his 2008 campaign. Eric Lichblock, a journalist of the Social Research, reports that the Obama administration to date represents largely a continuation and in some cases, an escalation on the crackdown of public information that was seen in the Bush administration. President Obama promised the American people full disclosure before any bill would be signed. This is again back in his campaign. Mark Tascott, editor of the Examiner, says it in a joking manner. Remember his campaign promises not to sign any major bill for 5 days after it reaches his desk, in order to allow the rest of us sufficient time to read the full text online. What happened to that? Hasn't happened. Transparency begins with the president. President Obama, for example, could end the controversy behind his birthplace. Instead, he chooses not to, and this proves to us the problem with his original promise. So in conclusion, I would say that President Obama has failed to keep his campaign promises, so the American voters next year should be better informed about the policies and the issues that are affecting the country here and overseas. Only then can things really change in this country. Thank you.
All right, the opening is fine. The proposition's clearly labeled. The secondary points are all set up for us, so that's okay. And you did a good job signposting as you got to each of those points. So all the mechanical, technical stuff is you're doing okay on. The arguments, I think, need to be developed a little bit more. The claims about the problems with the tax cuts, I think that's a little bit underdeveloped. There's two quotes from the same person, but you're mixing information about unemployment benefits and the tax cuts. You give us some argument about how the higher your income, the greater amount of benefit that you get, and I'm not sure what's controversial about that, except that there's some argument that suggests that the money is not going to places that it's needed, and I think that that's something that should be developed a little bit more. In particular, on some of the promises that Obama made, you want to make sure that you give us a specific citation on those promises. So if he was campaigning in 2008, tell us what speech he said where he's going to have the most transparent administration in history, or give us the campaign slug line about how he's going to let these tax cuts disappear, or he's going to close Guantanamo. I think Guantanamo was the clearest of the promises that you identified. I don't think there's a lot of doubt about the others, but I think it would be clearer if you had the citation that this is when he made that particular promise. Excuse me. The Guantanamo issue is, I think, underdeveloped. You've got a source that you present talking about problems at Guantanamo that I didn't really think was very clear, and you're making a lot of presuppositions that the decisions that Obama made when he was campaigning were the good decisions and that he's now making bad decisions as president. I think what you need to do is prove that. In other words, that he was right to promise to close Guantanamo, and his failing to do so is a violation of something that's important. He was right to say we should get rid of the Bush tax cuts, and then his failure to do so is going to have some negative consequence. As it is, the fact that he didn't keep the promise, there might be good reasons why he didn't keep the promise on the tax cut thing. For instance, I think there's a big argument about that we got to look at this in the context of what the economy is, for instance. And the transparency issue, I thought, was the one that could have been the most clearly developed. You had one piece of evidence that was pretty good explaining what some of the problems were on that, but I think you needed some more examples. The the birth certificate issue, I don't think is really the best example on this particular point. You mentioned, for instance, that he promised he wasn't going to sign a bill for 5 days after it's been passed to make sure everybody gets an opportunity to see it. Okay, so where has he not done that? You should be able to cite a couple of examples, and you don't really do that, and I think that that's something that could be done fairly easily. All right, thank you.